Hey everybody, welcome back to ChorderClub. On today's video, we're talking about one of my favorite topics, which is chording. Now, here in ChorderClub, with our CharaChorder devices, I think all of us know that chording is an exciting part of the device and we're all anxious to learn how to do it. So why don't we talk about that? First, we're going to dive into the basics of chording. Now, we've talked about chords before, so we know a little bit about them, but we're really going to get into the details about how they work and the actual mechanics behind them and some of the requirements to get them to work. Next, we're going to go into .io. We're going to look at the new Chords Mastered module and specifically the first tier in it, which contains the top 300 English words, which is what your CharaChorder device comes preloaded with chords for. Finally, we're going to go into the generative text menu, which is a really cool feature of CharaChorder devices that lets you access a whole host of customizable options. And then we're also going to quickly talk about impulse chording, which is a way that you can start to really add new chords to your library as you begin to master your device. All right, so chording. Let's talk about chording. Now, first off, what is a chord? We've talked about this in a previous video, but in case you've forgotten, simply put, a chord is whenever you press a few letters at the same time and then you release them at the same time on your CharaChorder device, and your CharaChorder recognizes that as a chord. It can output entire texts, words, phrases, whatever you want as a result of that chord. So you can kind of think of it like a little shortcut. You may hear this called a brief whenever you're using a few letters to output many words. But in general, a chord is just that. It's a way to output entire words or phrases at once with a single keystroke. Keystroke, again, meaning just pressing and releasing characters all in one swift motion. Now, for this to actually be able to happen while also simultaneously allowing you to type character by character like we've seen with our devices thus far, the CharaChorder has some intelligent processing inside of it that is doing calculations to try to understand if what you tried to input was in fact a chord. Now, I think the best way to explain this, like always, is to go ahead and just show you what this is going to look like. So I want to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I've got my screen up here, and I was talking about how there's press at the same time and release at the same time. So what I mean by that is when I type the word the, T-H-E, if I want to use the chord for that, which by default is T and E pressed at the same time, in order for the CharaChorder to not think that I'm trying to type, for example, the word test, it needs to have some way to determine, hey, he or she's pressed these letters at the same time and then released them at the same time, so I think it's a chord. Or, hey, you know, they typed these, but they weren't close enough in timing to be detected as a chord. So the way to think about it is basically what it's trying to do internally is when it receives the letters or your inputs, your actions to the device, it is going to measure the time basically between those actions. And if you press them at roughly the same time and you release them at roughly the same time, it's going to say, hey, they're trying to use a chord with those key combinations at that moment. Now, I say it like this, press at the same time and release at the same time, because you don't actually have to do it instantaneously. There is a amount of time in between pressing and releasing where it's okay, you can actually still just hold it and it will still work. So to demonstrate this, I'm gonna do the chord the. So you'll see T-H, and then I'm gonna release it, and then you're gonna see it go away, and it's gonna be replaced by the. So T-E, T-E, and then I release, T-E, and then I release. And so it doesn't actually have to be instantaneous. The only conditions for a chord to trigger are that the pressing and the releasing are at about the same time. Now, if you do press and hold it for too long, you're eventually going to start to get the letter in between to repeat. And then at the end, if you still release it at the same time, it's going to do a the. So you don't want to do that. So there is a window that is practical for you to want to do it. Anyway, you're trying to type really fast, so you're not going to want to hold it. But I think it's really helpful to see when I press T and E, I can hold them and then release them at the same time. So what is actually happening on our device whenever we're doing this? So what the computer sees from the CharaChorder device is T, E, and then T, E, and then backspace, backspace, T, H, E, all in a very short window of time. So when I do T, E, it immediately, the CharaChorder recognizes that it was a chord, and then it sends the backspace event twice, and then it types THE, space. Now, if we go back to what I was saying earlier about how does the CharaChorder, which is a portmanteau of the words character and chord, CharaChorder, how does it let you still do character entry? When I type the word TEST, that TE was not determined to be a chord. But what if I was trying to actually chord the word the, and I just messed up, and then I try it again, and I want to subsequently keep trying to get the chord right. This is something that's very useful when you're a beginner, and I want to demonstrate what it looks like. So if I type TE and I fail, and then I do TE again, but I don't fail, the CharaChorder actually recognizes that, hey, he was trying to type a chord, it's just the first time he didn't get it right, and so then it backspaces all of it. So this is really great for those challenging chords that you might start to encounter in .io, where you're trying to do the chord, but you can't quite get it right. So then you just try it, and eventually it will go ahead and replace it and get it right. Now, something I want to show you that can be helpful when you're first learning how to chord is something called spurring mode. So spurring mode is actually activated with a chord. On the CharaChorder 1, you chord both pinkies south, and it's going to say spurring on. And unfortunately for the CharaChorder Lite, I don't think there is a quick shortcut key to get into spurring mode, but you can turn it on in the generative text menu that I'm going to be showing you later today. But that's okay. For this, just see what it provides you and then maybe try it out when we get to that part. So with spurring mode, it's a little easier to just show you exactly what it does, but the idea of it is that you no longer can type character by character, but you can only type in chords. And instead of having to have that exact press and release timing, you can just press the letters and hold them, and then it will show up. So this is really good when you're trying to learn a new chord, how to teach your hand to do a new chord, etc. So if I just press T, E, it'll show the. If I press, and then I released it, and then if I press T, E, H, you can see that I have another chord show up. So you can kind of build up a chord letter by letter and see what's going to output on the screen. I don't know what the longest chord I have is, but for example, let's do C, O, U, could. If I add a N, it goes to couldn't. These are some custom chords that I have. I'll show you how to do those later in the video with Impulse. But again, this is the idea of spurring. You can kind of press letters individually, and you can have the chord appear sort of instantaneously. You can't type letter by letter, so that is a disadvantage of spurring. So if you actually wanted to use this to type all the time, you would have to have chords for every single word, which is probably going to be some time before you're there. So that is spurring. You can then toggle it off. Again, on the CharaChorder 1, that's just chording both pinkies south. On the CharaChorder Lite, that's going into the GTM, which I'll show how to access in a little bit, and turning the mode off there. And that's the basics of chording. So you've got to press the keys at the same time and then release them at the same time. It's pretty straightforward. It is hard to master, but I believe in you, and .io is going to be the way that you can start to practice so that you can really get it down pat. So yeah, why don't we hop right into .io? So I've got .io over here. I am going to quickly do a CPM test that is going to be fast enough to open up the new module. So hopefully by this point you are able to do a test faster than 200 CPM, and that is going to unlock the new module, Chords Mastered. Now, it's going to have a few introduction screens. ChM stands for Chords Master. This is where you're going to be learning the basics of chorded text entry, and you're really going to start to use a lot of what we talked about in the previous videos with practicing muscle memory, spaced repetition, etc., to build up that muscle memory of the chords. Now, Chords Mastered, there's a metric related to it, and basically we're trying to measure your ability to recall chords generated in a sort of random, not any particular order. And the formula is pretty simple. It's basically just taking the speed of the chord divided by 100. And so chord speed would be the average words per minute of your last 10 entries for any given word. So the, for example, the last 10 times that you're shown the, what speed did you type it at? Divided by 100, and that's going to give you a chords mastered value. And then it's basically just a sum of all your chords master values. So, you know, if you type it at 200, you're going to get a value of 2. If you type it at, let's say, what does it say here? 10 words per minute, you're going to get a chords master value of 0.1. And so ideally you can get a bunch of chords at 2. There's going to be a metric goal of getting 200 chords mastered. So that would be 100 chords typed at 2, or for example, 200 chords typed at 1, etc. Yeah. So again, .io, everything should look really familiar to what it looked like last time. You come into the English 200. It says English 200. It's actually English 300. Maybe this will be updated by the time this video goes live, but you'll come in here and you have your statistics, you have in your settings, you have target chords, you have practice slow chords, the speed goal, you have all of this stuff here. And basically what you're going to want to do is, instead of typing these words letter by letter, you're going to want to start to chord them. Now, your CharaChorder device comes with a preset amount of chords on it. Usually it's about 500 chords that correspond to the top 300 words. This tier in this module has 300 words in it, and that's the ones that have come preloaded on your device. Now there's 500 because a few of the chords there have a few different options for you to try. So in a later video, if we haven't already done it, we'll show you how you can connect to your device and download your chords so it's a little more easy to see. But while you're in this tier, I definitely recommend, if you're on a CharaChorder Lite, turn and show the CharaChorder Lite keyboard on, and if you're on a CharaChorder 1, turn that on. You'll notice that now, instead of just having one letter highlighted, it's actually going to have multiple, and this is going to correspond to the chord that you need to do. So for example, of on the CharaChorder 1 looks like this, on, in, of, he, so on and so forth. And then I can show some examples of the light. And you can see as I'm typing, of course, just like the other tiers, it's tracking my accuracy, my average words per minute for those entries, and the corresponding chords mastered value for those. Now, something that a lot of new users ask us about is, hey, you know, I see this chord on the screen and it just doesn't feel like I'm able to do that. Now, in the early days, I don't recommend trying too hard to change the chords, because more than likely when you're beginning, the reason why you can't perform the chord isn't because, you know, it's a bad chord. It's just that you aren't used to actually using your hands. You don't have the dexterity required to do some of the movements. I think, you know, if you're stuck on a particular one, write that one down and keep it on a list. And then as you know, practice, see if you can get it. But if you can't, then go ahead and use the method that I show later in this video, impulse chording, to set you up a new chord, and then just use that. You know, the devices, everybody's going to interact with them a little differently, and everybody is going to have chords that work better for them compared to somebody else. You know, a lot of times we'll have people in the community ask for, you know, other people's libraries, which, you know, isn't a crazy thing to ask, but when it comes down to it, everybody's hands are different and everybody's minds are different. How they want to set up their chords are different. How they want to remember their chords is different. And so it's really rather personal to you on what chords you use for what. Some people will take the starter chord list, they'll learn those, master them as is. Other people would take the starter chord list and they'll modify it. They'll take out ones that they don't like, they'll change them up. It's really up to you, but I suggest to start, just give it a try with the ones that are there. And if you feel like you really can't get one, come in the community, ask us and see, you know, do we think it's just because you're having particular difficulties with that one? Or is that really just a really tough chord and you should consider using a new one? And yeah, so the way the tier works is just like the other ones. You can just go in and do your chording. And if you don't, so, you know, for me, I don't actually have chords for some of these words, and I don't know that I necessarily want to have chords for some of them. It's up to you, but you don't have to chord all of the words in here. There's going to be plenty of words in here that you will want to have chords for, and so you'll want to actually practice that. So on and so forth. So that's how the Chords Master tiered works. You can see that my ChM here is going up. Now, something you might be wondering is, you know, in the previous videos, we saw how on the ChM module, there's the test tier and it updates this Chords Master up here. For the Chords Mastered module, sorry, it updates the CPM metric up here. For the Chords Master module, the equivalent to the test tier is going to be the all chords tier. We're going to talk about in another video because it makes sense to talk about that after we go through impulse chording. Yeah, and with that, I think we should actually transition back to Notepad, and I want to talk to you about the generative text menu. So the generative text menu is actually a really cool feature on CharaChorder devices that is sort of a way to access the brains of it, customize it, and really get access to a bunch of information without ever having to go to a custom software or go to a custom website, etc. So the way that you access it differs by device. On the CharaChorder 1, you're going to chord both pinkies north. So for example, like that, and it's going to pop up this GTM. On the CharaChorder Lite, you're going to chord the G key and the middle Alt key at the same time, and it's going to show up this very same menu. Now, between the CharaChorder Lite and the CharaChorder 1, there are some differences in the menu, but the overall structure is the same. We're going to have more in-depth videos of all the settings in here. One of the settings that I mentioned earlier that you might want to tweak if you're having troubles learning how to chord are the press and release tolerances, and those are going to be under the chording submenu. I want to quickly show you those and talk about how you actually navigate through the GTM. So this menu is up. It's a text-based menu. You can go anywhere that you're able to type on your computer or device, and you can see that some of the letters are enclosed in the caret symbols, and for example, chording here is enclosed with the C. So if I press C on my device, that's going to go into that sub menu. I have my press and release tolerances here set to 25 and 23. As a beginner, you might want to up that a little bit. You might want to go to 30 and 25, or maybe 35 and 30, or play around with the settings. So the way you would do that, for example, if you wanted to change your press, you would press P, and it says use the up and down arrow keys to adjust, and then you could adjust that. Now, I'm not going to go into too many details here about press and release tolerance, but it's basically like customizing that amount of time that you actually have to have the keys press and release at the same time, so the window gets a little bigger when you up those values. I'm going to go ahead and set mine back down, and if you want to get, once you're done setting it, you just press the enter key. Now I can just go right back in. And earlier I mentioned for the CharaChorder Lite, to access the spurring mode, you could actually just go to the chording menu here and then go to spurring, and then you can press O to turn it on or off. And yeah, so now what I want to show you is actually another built-in chord, and it is an impulse chord. And I am going to show you how to use this so that you can make your own chord for your own words and phrases. So the way that this works and the way that the community generally recommends it is, let's say you have a word that you want to create a chord for. I'm going to use John, my name John. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to think, okay, what do you want the chord to correspond to? So in my case, maybe I would do JOH. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to chord what I want. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to check to make sure that I don't already have a chord at John, because if I do, this process that I'm about to do is going to override it. So I don't have a chord there at John, JOH. So what I'm going to do is after I do that chord, I'm going to call up the impulse command, which again on the CharaChorder 1 is the duplicate key and the I key. On the CharaChorder, it's the middle alt and the I key. And once you do that, it's going to open up this new command. It says impulse output. And what you want to do at this point is you want to type what you want your chord to be. So in my case, it's John, so J-O-H-N. I'm going to press enter, just like in the GTM, using enter to confirm it. It's going to show me what I had last chorded. If it doesn't look right at this step, I could then go ahead and redo it. So for example, if I wanted it to be just J-O, but I wanted J-O-H, and now that I'm happy with it, I'm gonna press enter, and then it's gonna delete. Now, if I go and use J-O-H again, you'll see John, and you can use that chord now. So now I have a chord for my first name. This is the way that most experienced CharaChorder users will add chords to their library. So they'll be going about their day and they say, you know what, I really need a chord for this word that I'm typing, so I just type John. Let's assume I didn't have it. So then I could just say, oh, impulse chord, J-O-H-N, enter. That looks good, enter. Now I have a chord. So you can do it in literally seconds, adding a new chord to your library, and then now all of a sudden, you have access to a brand new chord. It is definitely one of the coolest features of CharaChorder, and I think once you master it, you're gonna fall in love with this particular feature. Yeah, and with that, that sort of concludes the video that I had on chording. Now, there are so many aspects of chording, from chording theories to particular tough chords, using diagonals in chords and 3D presses in chords and arpeggiate chording. There's a lot of topics. This is a very basic introduction. If there's particular topics that you'd really love us to make videos on, please let us know down in the comments what those are going to be. But for this video, the main focus for you is, again, just learn the basics of chording, get into .io, and start to try it out to get some muscle memory down, at least for the basic ones. In this video, we talked about what chords are and how they're actually used on our devices. We went into more details on what is happening behind the scenes to determine if a chord should be triggered, including the requirement of pressing the keys all at the same time and releasing them all at the same time. Next, we went into .io and we took a look at how to access and start to use the Chords mastered module. Finally, we learned about the generative text menu and how it allows us to customize settings on our device from anywhere that we can type. We also talked about impulse chords and how easy it is to set up and create new chords on the fly so that we can start to grow our libraries. All right, so like I said, this video is just the basics. So for your homework today, I want you to do exactly what I did. I want you to go ahead and create an impulse chord for your name and type it down in a comment below. And then more importantly, I really want you to just spend at least 30 minutes a day if you can practicing on the introduction tier in the Chords Mastered module so that you can start to practice and build up that muscle memory. And then next time we'll be talking about the all chords tier now that we start to build up our libraries with impulse chords. See you next time.